Hello, hello, and what is up, everybody? How are you? And welcome to a new episode of Rocket Live. I am your host, Chris Vaglio, and today I've got my awesome guest. I'm so excited to have him on today, Mr. Marc Ronick from Ironic Media. Mark, how the hell are you, buddy? Thanks for
I-
coming on today.
I'm doing well, thanks, Chris. And are you really that excited being that you chat with me just about every morning for an hour?
I am excited, man, because the thing is we do chat every morning for an hour, but this is like, we're podcasting. We're actually doing the things that we talk about doing on Clubhouse.
That's a
So
great point.
we're here actually doing it. So
Yeah.
that's the fun part. But
Well, it's a pleasure
it's a
to
lot
be
of
here
fun.
with you. It's a
Yeah,
pleasure.
I absolutely, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and beam in virtually from the Ironic Media Studios. I love it. I see Kermit back there. For those of you who are not watching the video version right now, I urge you to go watch the video version over on YouTube. But you can see Mark's background. He's got a really nice setup going on, some good lighting, and of course, the ever so popular Kermit the Frog back there. I like
That's
that.
right. That's right. Yeah, one of my
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah, if you check out Mark, if you follow him over on Instagram at Marc Ronick, and once again, you can use all the links in the show notes and in the video description below. But you can see Mark makes a lot of really good reels, and Kermit makes an appearance in quite a few of them.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, especially on a day where I've just had a day trying to make a new reel and ended up actually not even doing it. So I'm not feeling very proud of myself this afternoon. So
That's right. Sometimes you gotta just hit the delete button.
yeah,
Sometimes you gotta walk away and be like, you know what? I'm not creating right now. I'm gonna go do it some other day or,
yes,
or
yes,
tomorrow or whatever. It's fine. It's
yes.
good.
I had higher priorities like getting my air conditioning in my house fixed. That was a higher priority today.
That is a very high priority,
Yeah,
especially as we're recording this. We're in the middle. Well, I guess summer really just started, but we're in like mid July already.
yeah, yeah.
So, got to get that fixed. But so
Indeed.
I know some people are just excited to hear us talking about air conditioning, but we're not talking about air conditioning today. Sorry, folks. We're actually going to talk more about for all the people that listen to the show about air conditioning. We're going to be talking a lot about podcasting today because that is actually Mark's specialty. As you would say, Mark is an experienced podcast producer for 15 plus years, and not only have I become very friendly with Mark over the last bunch of months, but I've also had the pleasure of working with Mark one on one. He's worked with me and my co-host in the other show that I host, the Chris and Amanda show. For those of the folks here who may not know the other show, that's another show that I do. And Mark has been really great helping us out as far as helping us with some of our creative and some of our strategy. And I wanted to have Mark come on today because not just to talk about podcasting in general, but we're going to talk a lot about guests because this is a thing that comes up a little bit. And for anybody that follows me on social media and LinkedIn in particular, I've been publishing a series of call them what you want, articles, newsletters. LinkedIn's got that whole newsletter thing. So I've been publishing those. And one of the things that have come up recently through those, as I've been talking about podcasting, is about guests. And I figured, well, here's a perfect opportunity to get someone on who actually knows what they're talking about and is
Mhm.
an expert. So I figured, well, let's take what I've been doing written wise and actually make do an interview with somebody who actually does this for a living and talks and helps other podcasters to level up their podcast. And guest is one of those things. So for all of you that are watching live right now, thank you all so much for checking in. Please feel free to drop any questions or comments as we go along, because that's the whole point of doing this live. So that way Mark can answer any of your questions as we go. If you're watching or listening to the replay of this, same thing. Feel free to shoot us over any questions at all. Mark's contact info is all, once again, in the show notes and the video description below. And he's a great guy and he's always happy to help. And so, Mark, I'd like to just set the stage a little bit before we dive deep into it, because I do think it's worth, just for people that don't know who you are, just to get a little bit of background about what you're doing, Ironic Media, and just you in general and your experience.
Sure. Yeah. Ironic Media started right before the pandemic. I mean, it was really kind of in the making for about 6 months, probably prior to the pandemic. And like you said, I've been doing this for a long time now,
Right.
and I've been hired full time to work for podcasts and helping them grow, helping them monetize, etc. big and small. I've worked with podcasts the size that gets 20,000 downloads per episode on a
Mhm.
daily basis, and I've worked with super small podcasts just starting out, looking to get that kind of growth. So I've been doing it for a while, and finally realized I had been a TV producer for about 5 years leading up to this, and
Mhm.
realized it just wasn't my jam. Just wasn't
Yeah.
something I was into. Podcasting was my passion, and so I started this business. I grabbed 3 people that I knew personally that I felt would be great for podcasting, and basically offered pro bono just to get some actual clients under the belt of the
Mhm.
business. And I think 2 of the 3 all planned, and still did, but planned to launch in March, which is when that pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So it was a little scary at first, and as you know, podcasting blew up with the pandemic. So it was great timing for me,
Right.
despite the fact that it did such awful things to a lot of people. But for a business, it did great for me, and I've been doing it ever since. I've got clients, probably got a couple dozen clients now, and also work with people both from coaching, where I will literally sit down with them on a week to week basis and help them with whatever area they're looking to improve. And
Mhm.
I also will work with brand new podcasters, people that see that there's potential, see that there's value in podcasting, and really either don't know what to do or don't care about how to do it. They just want to do it and they
Right.
need help. And so I have both a production agency along with that coaching business, all under this Ironic Media umbrella. And that was great timing pulling up the Ironic Media banner there as I said it.
Yeah, there you go. And once again, for those of you who are not watching, you definitely want to head over to Mark's website, which is ironicmedia.com, and it's spelled IRONICK media, media.com. And that link is in the show notes and video description below. And I know Mark also offers free discovery sessions and all that. So
Yep.
definitely take him up on that as we go through the rest of this discussion today. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of set the stage here, and just so everybody kind of gets like your background and what's going on, and how you came to this point. And much like myself, I mean, I didn't start podcasting during the pandemic, but I started this show in particular during the pandemic. And it started off as a very much like a little, like, it wasn't even really, I would say, even a podcast, in the sense that it was just me doing video interviews, and I would upload them to LinkedIn. And they used to call it my LinkedIn friends.
Mm,
And it was just people I interviewed on LinkedIn, and I would try to get it to be under the time, because LinkedIn only lets you upload about 10 minutes of video in
mm,
their native player. And I just started off doing that. Like, I would interview people, I would cut it, and I would upload it, and that was the start of it. And then when I got approved for LinkedIn Live, that's when I was like, well, wait a second, I can actually, do longer live streams. I can now, and then I can take that and repurpose it and use it on an audio feed. In fact, some of the early episodes of the Rocket Live podcast, I think like maybe the first like maybe 4 or 5 are sort of those um LinkedIn my LinkedIn friends, like audio that I started off doing a lot, doing
mhm.
the stream with, and then started populating it with more of the longer shows. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's one of those things where, I know some people have started podcasts, and it didn't, it just, well, quote unquote, pod fade started to happen,
Mhm.
and they aren't with it. But for some folks, they're still out there and going, and this show's still going, and also the Chris and Amanda show was also born out of the pandemic as well. But I think what makes you interesting um is that you've really found a way to use your, like, your talent, the things that you've already been doing, and use to help other people. And podcasting, it seems like, I mean, the big joke right now is like everybody has a podcast, people have multiple podcasts. But to really take it from, hey, it's this thing you do, to, like, it's a fun thing I do on the side, hobby, but then to actually start moving it into a business, right? It's actually
Mm.
begin to, monetize it, turn it into something a lot more, really takes a lot of work. It's not something that you just start making money overnight. It just, that's not how it works at
Right.
all.
Right. No, it's not. And, I for some reason, people have it in their heads that when they start a podcast, it's going to become this instant money maker like you're
Yeah.
talking about. And it can, I mean, it certainly can deliver. The thing is it'll deliver as well as anything else that you put effort into, right? So if you're starting a business, you're not starting a business and walking away from it and saying, okay, deliver all the money, right?
Yeah.
You actually have to work to get those clients. And that's where the disconnect is. And you mentioned it earlier, that little catchphrase we use sometimes, pod fade. That's where that kicks in, because people start to realize, oh wait, I got to actually put the work into this, and that becomes challenging.
Yeah.
So if you're going in with the right mentality, it can do a lot for you in your business. If you're going in expecting it to do the work for you, you've got another thing coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, and one of the things that we talk about is, and this is something you deal with a lot, is that leveling up, right? So listen, like anything, and I always bring things back to bands. I mean, you and I talk about this a lot, but it's always
Yeah.
like, hey, when you start a band, a lot of times it's like you're either playing cover songs, probably not so well, or maybe you're just bashing out on the same three chords, and all that's fine. And I make the equivalent of that to like starting to podcast. Like, even like I just said, like I started off literally making videos and then uploading them to LinkedIn as this that was how the show started, and it
Right.
was like raw and just was. But as time went on, I wanted to get better. I wanted to get technically better. I wanted it to look better. I wanted it to sound better. I wanted the
Sure.
marketer. Because to me it's just a natural progression of, if you're doing something, you want it to be better. And on top of that, one of the things, because this show in particular, like, this is an interview show, right? I have guests on. I don't do Rocket Live. I don't go on. I don't do solo things. I'm very much, I like to talk to people. I like having conversations. I like people participating and all that. And one of the things that I've learned how to do a lot better, because when I started, I was not very good at getting guests, in the sense of like, or even getting the right guests. I was kind of like, well, I'm just going to get anybody to come on because I wanted to interview people. But as I grew and developed and I learned my audience, I was like, well, there's certain kinds of guests that I really want to have on, because I know my audience, I like talking to them, but like I see the audience really likes hearing from them.
Mm,
And I started to learn a lot of the intricacies about bringing guests on and how to onboard them and bring them on properly. And I'm still learning and I'm still getting better. And that's something too that I know you deal with a lot, as part of, when you're talking about people with podcasting. So I do want to maybe talk a little bit about that for anybody that's listening out there. And please, once again, if you're watching live, feel free to ask questions, or drop in the comments, and we'll bring them up and we'll answer questions. Mark's here to talk to all of us today, and help answer any questions that you may have around podcasting or this topic that we're getting into, which is guests. How do you get guests? How do you onboard guests? How do you identify guests? How do you do this? How do we interview? How do we get prepared better? So, Mark, I'd love to turn it over to you a little bit, and talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I mean, if you're just starting your podcast, and I'm going to make the assumption that you're doing it for business. You're doing it either to help grow your business, bring in more sales, build your authority, etc. So keeping that in mind, the first place to start when looking for a guest is really your own network. I think that's actually the best place to start for a lot of new podcasters, especially ones that don't have a lot of broadcast experience or podcast experience. So what I suggest is go to your network. It could be a colleague. It could be, and also I should say, I'm assuming that you are talking about topics that are related to the business that you're in,
Right.
that you're trying to grow. So yeah, bring in colleagues, people that you work with. It could be employees, it could be your employer, it could be your clients. So if you're a business coach, one of the things that I encourage people to do, and I don't think enough people are doing it, is to bring in some clients that are willing to do a coaching call as an episode of your podcast, because that's putting you right on display. It's showcasing your talents, your abilities. It's just the perfect way to get somebody from a listener to a client, is because they can hear you in
Mm,
action. So yeah, getting people that you know, and also it can be family, anything that's going to help make you comfortable, because you've already got some kind of chemistry with that person.
right.
Because the listeners, whether they realize it or not, they're picking up on it if you are uncomfortable or struggling. So if you need to get your feet wet, get those podcasting legs, that's what I would suggest, is start with somebody that you know and related to the field that you're
Mhm.
talking about. And ultimately, I have to say, you really do want to be very specific about your topics and what you're talking about. So if you are doing a podcast about podcasts, right? I want to make sure I'm bringing in people with value that can contribute to a podcast conversation. So yeah, that would be my absolute first place to start. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think that that's solid advice because, and even that's, when I first started, as I said, I was called to show my LinkedIn friends, and my whole premise originally was I'm going to interview people from my LinkedIn network in the hopes that, um, by me interviewing them, it's actually going to help them build their business because it's then exposing to other people in my LinkedIn network.
Yeah.
So that was the original premise of the show, and and to the most part, even as of today, it still is an underlying mission of mine is to make sure that the people I have on have an opportunity to show off their expertise, and hopefully they'll get some business and expose them to my network and so on and so forth. But I think that's really solid because it is a great way to get started. And in fact, too, even as you were saying that too, I was like, oh wow, the coach I work with, Dallas Travers, she had me on, and you could listen to her podcast, and her podcast is essentially, interviewing people like she's my coach. And I did a podcast episode with her with her where she coached me on a call, and she does a lot of that. And I'm like,
That's
I
awesome.
didn't even think of that as yes, that's a great place to start, is to actually record a coaching session and put it out as a podcast because yeah, people, it shows off your talents and abilities and what you do, but it also is a great learning experience for whoever's listening to that, especially if it's specific on a certain challenge or whatever it is that episode's about, or
Mm.
that they're working through. So that's a really good idea. I could completely didn't even think of that one, and I've been through it.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of podcasters, that when I have these kinds of conversations with podcasters, that's often the response I get, like, "Oh yeah, why didn't I think of that?"
Right.
And I think it's because we sometimes get in our own heads. So I would encourage you, like, if something sounds right to you, if you're hearing somebody else do it, or if you get an idea, don't just discount it. Explore that a little bit, because oftentimes you do know the answer. You've got the answer. For example, somebody will say to me, how does it sound? Like, they were asking me about the audio quality of their podcast.
Right.
And a lot of times, and it's not to be a smartass, I will say to them, well, how do you think it sounds? And then I'm giving them that opportunity. I'm empowering them to stop and say, oh, wait, my opinion does matter. And I do actually have an opinion. And 9 times out of 10, they have the answer. They'll share it with me. Oh, yeah, it doesn't sound right. I'm too loud. My guest is too soft,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And then we work through it. So, yeah, ask yourself the question. And a lot of times go with that, because the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work and you go move on to the next solution. It's not going to make or break you if it doesn't work right away.
Yeah, excellent point. It's not going to break you, and that's the thing, is you have to try things out and see what works, what doesn't work, and I know listening back to your own to your own voice a lot of times, it drives me crazy. I have a hard
Mhm.
time sitting back and listening to my voice on things, and I'm so super critical of myself.
Yeah.
But it is something that you need to do if you want to become better at your craft, right? If you want your podcast to grow or be more than just, hey, it's a fun thing I do and it's great. And my friends and family listen to it and that's it. Hey, and that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. But
Mm-mm.
if you make the decision of saying, well, now I'd actually like it to grow and get better, then these are the things you really you need to start paying attention to.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if it's a hobby, then do your thing. If you genuinely want to grow and monetize this, yeah, you got to pay attention to things like that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So in keeping with the topic of guests, and I think that what we just talked about was a great way to identify guests, because I think that's a thing of people are like, well, I want to have guests on. I don't even know who am I going to have on. I don't even know how to do that. How do I reach out to them? So I think that's the next step, is if you have somebody, what's a great way, or what are some great tips or advice you can give when it comes to saying, well, reaching out and or everybody onboarding a guest
Mm.
onto your show and getting them ready in that sense.
Yeah, well, first I would say, don't be afraid to ask anyone that if they are if they are going to be a good fit for your podcast, don't be afraid to ask anybody. And what I mean by that is if there's a big name out there, you should still ask, right? Like
Right.
don't be intimidated by the big names. They've been asked before. They know what they're doing, and it'll surprise you. A lot of them are going to say yes. That was one of the things early on in my podcasting career that I realized because you know podcasters that I worked for would ask me, oh, can we get this person? And I would hesitate. I'd be like, well, I'll ask, but I really don't think we're going to get them. And almost every time I would go and ask, they would say, yeah, sure, why not? Because it's an opportunity for them to talk about something they're passionate about, to get in front of people.
Right.
And I think that the people who get it understand that, okay, yeah, maybe this podcast I'm going on doesn't have tens of thousands of listeners, but all I need is to get one of them to convert into a client, and I'll be happy with that interview.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask, because especially as podcasts grow in popularity, people get used to it. People are open to the idea. So I would definitely suggest that first. And I also want to say there are services out there that will help you find the right guest.
Mhm.
Right. So, for
Right.
example, one that I particularly am fond of is podmatch.com. And it's essentially the equivalent of a dating service for podcasters and guests, right? So guests kind of throw their hat in the ring in the database. The hosts throw theirs in, and matches are made, and you can communicate through the platform. You can figure out if they're the right fit, and a lot of that's done for you already using Podmatch. And
Mhm.
then you make those connections and get them on their way. So that's a great resource for anybody who's struggling to find guests. And so to answer some of your questions as far as onboarding, so let's say they say yes, they're ready to go on your podcast. The actually, even before that, Chris, we should talk about how do what are the things you need to ask them to come on your podcast. Sure, you can just say, will you be on my podcast?
Right.
And you probably want to give them some more information than that,
Right. And that's
right?
actually leads into one of the questions, which I think is great that we just got asked in the chat, which was from CF Jackson. What sort of information do the big names need to see in your pitch? So I think this is kind of goes along with what you're
Perfect.
just about to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think, and really, this can apply to any name. Maybe it's just whether it's big or small, but it's somebody you don't know or doesn't know you. My suggestion would be to give them some basic information. First of all, keep if it's say like a direct message or an email, keep it short and sweet.
Mm.
I'm telling you right now, if you're going to give paragraphs and paragraphs about your journey, about your podcast journey, and what it's about, you're going to lose some people, right?
Right.
So short and sweet. It's that old fashioned elevator pitch. You want to quickly tell them who you're serving, who your audience is. That's probably the most important thing a guest wants to know.
Mhm.
Who are the people you're talking to? Are you talking to entrepreneurs? Are you talking to podcasters? Whatever that looks like, make sure that they know that. And if you can really pinpoint your listener, which hopefully you're able to do even prior to this, you want to tell them about your listeners. These are my listeners. They like this. They want this. They need help with that,
Mhm.
etc. So short and sweet. Tell them about your show by identifying your guests. Give them a brief 3-4 sentences about your show. And the big thing that people fail to do is give them some ideas as to what you want to talk about with them,
Right.
right? So you might know that this big name guest has a book coming out, and you'll reach out and say, "Hey, I hear you have a new book that's coming out. I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to share it with my audience." And they'll likely want to do it because they have a book to promote anyway.
Of
So
course.
get to know the guest, show them that you've done your homework, right?
Mhm.
Show them that you know who they are, that and provide some options for them as to what you want to talk about. And lastly, and give them that opportunity, ask them, what would you like to talk about if you were on this show? But I think if you don't provide that, you're creating more work for your guest, because it's like, well, you come on my podcast and now your guest is thinking, well, yeah, I could do that. What the hell am I going to talk about now? you know,
Right, right.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's and that's one of the things I always try to do because I've made that mistake and it just sometimes it just hey I didn't give them enough heads up or we had a conversation and and I didn't come back and circle back on it and I didn't kind of set an agenda or whatever and so I agree. I think that making sure that you're sort of on the same page or at least like what they want to talk about that it's everybody sort of is there so that way you have a quality show, like you have a quality conversation. And that's the thing is like the conversation can still be very organic. It could still go where it goes, but at least it has a little direction.
Yeah, right. And here's a little pro tip for you too. When you are reaching out, you may want to consider opening, like let's say you DM somebody and you're asking them to be a guest. Start it out by referencing one of their recent posts that they posted on social media. But
Smart.
and don't just reference it. Give some insight, some feedback, your reaction, your feelings about it. I really loved your post and I like in particular when you talked about this, right? And don't
Right.
I don't know if you curse on your show, but don't bullshit them, right? Like find a post that you could actually really connect with and identify with, and most likely you're going to because they're in a related field at the very least as to what you like to talk about anyway. So referencing that will capture their attention. It's like, oh, this person's really paying attention. This person really is interested in what I have to say, and that's a great way to get that door a little more open for you to make that ask.
Yeah, great advice. I mean, that's as you know, people in business, business owners from a sales quote unquote and business development perspective, you definitely use the same technique. And this is that sort of a lot of the techniques that you kind of use to develop sales and business for yourself actually apply to, trying to find guests or bring guests on the show because it's the same thing. You're trying to establish a little bond rapport, you're trying to establish a little bit of trust,
Hmm.
that and of course quality because if they're giving their time to come on your show and whether they're a name or not like you always should be respectful of everybody's time because time is precious and and you just want to set the right tone whether it's a comedy show or a serious discussion or whatever it is like just set the tone right away so that way you have a really really great show
Yeah,
and your
yeah.
guest feels comfortable.
Absolutely. I think that's key. And, if you are a bigger show, you have, say, maybe a few thousand listeners per episode or whatever that looks like. That's information that you may be comfortable sharing. Like that's okay. Right. Like I don't have a problem with that. And, because that's at least now giving them a little more incentive to want to be on your show. If you've got that carrot you can dangle. And if you don't, that's okay too, right?
Right.
Because again, that goes back to what we were talking about. Even a small audience can still deliver results that your guest may be looking for. So it's just you may not want to open with, yeah, I've got 100 listeners or whatever that is. That may not be your opening line, but they might still ask. And don't be ashamed. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal. There are lots of podcasts that are getting 100 downloads or less per episode. And it matters. What matters is the quality of that audience, not the quantity.
Yes, exactly. Well said. And I talk about this a lot. I have to remind myself of that a lot when I'm looking at my data and analytics that like, I don't have like 100, 200, 300 downloads per episode, but also got to remember like, but I have a really engaged audience who likes the content that I put out and wants to listen and supports the people I have on. And I'd rather have that all day than just have a bunch of like really it's just numbers that
Yeah.
don't really mean anything. It's like having like 10,000 subscribers on followers on Instagram. But if 9,950 of them are just don't even interact with your content, well then what does it even matter?
Right.
It's not they're not quality.
I was just having this conversation with my wife, and as long as I've been podcasting, and as much as I know that, now that I'm in the world of Instagram and looking to grow an Instagram account, I fall into that trap again with the numbers, right? And to the point where I was getting almost obsessive about it, and I was not putting into perspective the fact that okay, maybe my numbers aren't up here yet, but look at my sales lately, right? It's like I'm all of a sudden I'm getting more and more discovery calls than I ever have before. I'm getting more and more clients than I did the previous year. So what's more important to me? And that goes to really understanding and staying connected with your goals. And sure,
Right.
one of my goals is to get to 10,000 followers on my Instagram by the end of the year, but that's not my main goal. My main goal is to, make more money than I did the previous year. And it's happening and I'm not connecting with that. Right. So it was a good reminder to have that conversation and a good reframe that I needed.
Yes, and see if Jackson agrees with you.
Oh, I see
Little
that.
fire emoji. You're on fire, buddy.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Love it. Yeah, no, and I agree with you 100%. Actually, really, really fast too. A fast story is that. So I was mentioning my coach, who I've been working with for almost 2 years now, and she's wonderful, Dallas Travers. She actually she did like such a ballsy punk rock move, and I love her for this. Is one of the reasons why I'm so glad that I was working with her.
Mhm.
So she had an Instagram account where she had about 15,000 plus followers, and she did this year. She shut that Instagram account down because she'd had it for a really long time. And she just basically determined that, you know what? I'm going to guess that more than half, way more than half of them are people that probably started following her ages ago. She's like, when I used to do other businesses and what I do now is not relevant at all.
Mm.
So, but therefore, then it like kind of like so what she did, she shut her account down and started a brand new Instagram
Wow.
account and put it out there so that way she could rebuild it based with an engaged audience. And her whole thing is like, I'd rather have 800 like engaged people following me and interacting with content. And like you said, going on discovery calls and building, then
Mhm.
have 15,000 people that is really at the end of the day, it just becomes a vanity number. And
Yeah.
vanity numbers don't pay the bills.
Nope. Nope, they sure don't. They sure don't. And I think more and more people are connecting with that. I think the pandemic helped a lot of people with their mind shift. And I think that's why, again, that goes back to don't ever be afraid to ask people to be on your show, no matter how big you think they are,
Right.
because more and more people are understanding this concept now that it is about the quality of your numbers, not the quantity. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Focus on building a really strong community is really what it's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, so getting back to the guest thing. So once we've identified a guest, we've reached
Reach
out
out.
and
Mhm.
onboarded them and set up proper expectations. Now here we are. We're on the show, right? And we're interviewing them. So what are some of the things that because we talk about this a lot. You real quick for everybody too. Like Mark and I talk every day. Full disclosure, like Mark runs the podcast morning chat on Clubhouse. I think you've heard us talk about it here before. I think we've actually had Pedro Maciel, who was on this show
Mhm.
last year, and Pedro was actually the originator of that room. And you've kind of now have taken it over. He's passed the torch over to you to help run and mod that room, and it's a wonderful community that meets every well, basically 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Eastern. And all we do is talk about podcasting, open discussions, great community. Nothing is off limits as far as podcasting goes. Like whether you're just starting out, haven't started yet, or you've been in it for a long time, you're a seasoned pro, like everybody is welcome. And we have these discussions. We pick topics every day and we go through them. And this is one of the topics that's actually come up quite a bit. And it's great because every time it does, myself personally, I learned so much from a lot of the podcasters in the room. And that is when we're talking about like interviewing a guest, right? Bringing the guest on, interviewing them, and sort of tips and things that like really create a quality show for you as a host, but also for the guest, and also making the guest feel comfortable and getting like that kind of a show that people want to listen to. So, Mark, I'd love to ask you about, well, so what are some of your like, some of your top insider tips on how to do that.
Yeah, one of the I was actually working on some content today and around this, and one of the things that drives me crazy, and after researching, I know it drives a lot of listeners crazy, is a mistake. I'll start with a mistake,
Sure.
something that I wouldn't like you to do if you started with a guest, and that is overdoing it with the guest bio. right? Like, so Chris, you
Yeah.
didn't sit here when we started and read my entire resume to your audience. And many podcasters do. And not only do, they
I
do it
used to do that.
multiple times. You used to do it?
I did. I used to do it because I thought, you know what? In my head, I felt like, oh my gosh, it's so important. Like, but then I found myself then asking them once I just did it. So tell me a little bit about your and I would be editing. I'm like, wait a second, I just read it and now I'm asking them the same thing I
Right.
just read through. What am I
Right.
doing? And it finally clicked on me, but until I started like thinking about it that way, I'm like, why am I doing that?
Yeah.
They're talking
Right.
about it anyway.
And here's the other thing, Chris, I'll tell you is don't even ask them about their background, right? Like it's too open-ended of a question.
Hmm.
It can go in so many different directions. And by the time they actually say something that you can connect with, that's relevant to the interview, you might have lost half your audience because they're so bored
Good
hearing
point.
an entire life story. So what I find that people do that I don't recommend is they'll do a lot of people will record their introduction first before they sit down with their guest, right? And they use that as an opportunity to read the bio, to read the resume, and take 3 4 minutes or something like that just sitting there reading a resume. So I
Right.
would scrap that, and I would say instead, since a lot of people are pre-recording those interviews, do that pre-record after the interview and share a little bit in that intro about what your audience can look forward to, right? Like here's what problem this guest is going to help you solve today, right? That's going to keep an engaged listener a lot more. Then
Right. Yeah.
when you get to the hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? First of all that banter, you can just edit that out at the end. I get it that you want to develop that rapport, you want to have that small talk, and your audience doesn't need to hear it, right?
Hmm.
So just cut that out. And I would say lead with one of your what you consider one of your better questions are, and or maybe that question is something that is somewhat leading in the sense that it is revealing the credibility of your guest, because I think that a lot of hosts, the reason why they are so repetitious with the resume is
Hmm.
because they want to prove to their audience that this person they have on is going to do what you want them to do. And
It's a good
really
point. It's a good
they're
point.
they're listening. You're going to prove that to them, and they're already there. You've intrigued them enough that with the title, with the description, they're there. They're in it. So get right to it and ask a question. Like if you've got an author, like we were talking about earlier, if you got
Right.
somebody's writing a new book and it's coming out next week, it's like, so tell me a little bit about you've just written a book and it's coming out next week. Tell me, what was the hardest part about writing that book? I know it was your first book. What was your biggest challenge writing your very first book? Boom. Now we know that they've written a book on this topic. We're going to hear more about this book now, and we're going to hear something. We're going to actually make this person human, right?
Hmm.
Because we're going to see that, oh, they struggle. They have their challenges too. And
Right.
let's find out how did you overcome that struggle? How did you overcome that challenge? Now your audience is even more into it. They're like, okay, this is a person that I can connect with, that I can relate to, and I know that they've got experience. They're writing a book about this stuff. Boom, you've got an engaged interview right out of the gate. So avoid the
Right.
whole resume nonsense and ask questions that can lead them to prove their expertise, and ultimately you want to ask them questions that is going to help that audience solve whatever problem they're dealing with.
Yeah, I think that's that's well said. And I mean, this is exactly what we, it just once again, this is what we talk about a lot in that room in that daily podcast morning chat. So if
Mhm.
anybody wants to jump in, if you're hearing this or watching this now or watching the replay of this, definitely come in and join us because these are the types of conversations we get into, and these are the types of questions that get answered Monday through Friday. I mean, it's amazing, and I love the community. People are always bringing in great questions, and this one about guests and interviewing and all that, it comes up a lot. Comes
Yeah.
up a lot. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people do this when they start a podcast, that is what they rely on is a guest, right? Because
Right.
it is a bit of a security blanket. And unfortunately, to a fault sometimes, because
Yeah.
and I did want to talk about this, so this is a good segue because
Yeah.
my my concern when people are relying on their guests is that each episode becomes it's more about the guest than it is about the host.
Right.
And that's okay to a point. But your audience is coming for that content, as we say in our room, and they come for the content and they stay for the host. And if you're not giving them enough of you,
Right.
there's no reason for them to keep coming back. It's like, oh, who's the guest this week? I don't know who that is, so whatever. And but if you're connecting with them as a host,
Mhm.
and they know who you are, and you're doing that both through your podcast, you're doing that on social media, sharing more of who you are, your personality. That's what's going to grab them. So you have to find that balance, and you have to also be okay with sharing your own opinions, even if they differ from your guest. Right? That
Yeah.
it's another mistake that people often make. It's like whatever their guest says, it's like, yep, 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 okay, okay, yep, yep, yep. Right. And that's not interesting. Right. So if you have a difference of opinion that you can speak to, share that with the person. And it's not to get into an argument, it's not to butt heads, it's to share a difference of opinion and allow your audience to make the call as to what works for them. Because in reality, there is no such thing as right or wrong. It's what works for some people and what works for others. So, what you might have to say might resonate with some people in your audience, and what your guest might have to say might resonate, and they don't have to be the same message,
Right.
right? So, don't be afraid to share your thoughts and opinions. And I've been encouraging people lately to get away from that Q&A back and forth because everybody's doing it, and instead and because I want to learn more about the host. So instead, it's like actually narrate your podcast. Ask a question, you'll have all your questions, record it as you would question answer, question answer. Find those great moments from the interview and segment them, make them into segments, and then record after you setting up the segment. In this next segment, we're going to be learning about how to deal with X, Y, and Z and great solutions for X, Y, and Z, and then get into it. Here's what my guest had to say. Let the guest answer. You don't even actually have to insert yourself unless you've added to that content, to that
Right.
otherwise, just let them roll, play their answers, and then wrap the segment up or head into the next question by maybe sharing a takeaway that you got from that segment and lead into your next segment. Okay, so in the next part of the interview, we talked about A, B, and C, and give it a little setup, give it a little intrigue, and then get to the meat of it. And again, you can wrap that up at the end of that segment and do it as many times as you can until you've run out of good stuff to say. Don't overdo it, but just that's a great opportunity to find the best parts of the interview and not have to keep all the parts of the interview that may not have been so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that was dynamite. That was really great advice. And as you're talking too, I'm like, oh man, I do some of this stuff. Like I do some of this stuff. Like,
I have
but but it's worth like thinking about it and saying, like, once again, how do you get better for you? Like, this all comes back down to as well, like, what do you want to do with your show, right? Do you just want the show to be, hey, this fun thing that you do where you flip it on and you talk and you have some fun and that's it and you publish it and great and then you go on and then you do the next one, whatever. Nothing wrong with any of that, by the way. If that's what you want to do,
Mhm.
absolutely please continue to do it. The point of all this that we're talking about is to really say, hey, for the people that are now ready to say, I want to make this better. I want to put out more quality. I want to get different guests or better guests maybe for my show. How do I do all that because I don't know how to do it? That's the points here that we're trying to make is like when you're ready to go to that next level, what
Right.
Mark's talking about, these are the tips, the advice that that people are doing. And that's why you get like, well, how come that podcast is better than mine? Well, listen to that, really listen to that show and listen to what they're doing. Like break it down, think about it, like listen to other shows that like you're seeing that like, oh my God, why are they so good? Well, oh, sit and listen to the show, break it down. Why are they so good? Like, how does the
Right.
host? How do they ask questions? How does the flow go? Like, break it down as from a like diagram it out, like flow
Yeah.
chart it, like whatever. But you'll see it, and you'll see where the difference is as to why maybe that show is more successful or more popular or whatever than like yours.
Yeah, success leaves clues, right?
Yeah,
So learn from those podcasts that you know are either doing really well or they are really good for you. If it's something that clicks with you, emulate that, and it's okay. You'll do it in your own style, and you can pick up a lot of good little tricks and things that these hosts are doing. So absolutely, success leaves clues, and I think that it also goes back to something earlier we were saying about, oh, I can't even remember now, but basically that you want to make sure that you know the answer. That's what I wanted to say.
right.
You know the answer probably already. If you stop and think about why is it that they're so good, you probably know the answer. And if you don't, listen to a little bit of that podcast, then go and listen to a little bit of yours and see where you can start finding those differences. And that's where you can start making those tweaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta be I mean, I do it all the time. I'm always listening to in shows that I really enjoy, but a lot of times I will just say, well, you know what? I'm not listening to this with entertainment ears right now. I actually want to listen to this and learn from what they're doing. Let me break it down a little bit. Like, why is this show successful? What do they do different that I'm doing? And yeah, and it does. It really helps. And once again, it's about being motivated and being inspired, not being so like, oh, they're so much better. I can never be that better. Nah, meh,
Yeah.
meh. Wrong idea, wrong attitude. That's just putting limiting self beliefs on yourself. Don't even
Yeah.
think about that because everybody started from the same place, you
Yep.
know and yeah, you may see some celebrity podcaster. Yeah, what do they have on the advantage? They have a built-in audience, like,
Yeah.
and that just is what it
And you know
is.
what? It took them years to get that built-in audience.
Exactly. It's not
Even
like they
even
just
though
got
they
famous
started
overnight.
maybe they started a
Yeah.
podcast and they were an instant success, but they're an instant success because they built up that audience from all the other things that they were doing.
Right, right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So, don't I hope people get inspired after hearing this and get motivated onto how like these are just all the little bits and things that you could be doing if you want to do it, if you choose to want to do it to help you definitely level up your podcasting game and get things to that level that you want. And this is what Mark does. Not just about guests, but like this is what you're doing. And I will say firsthand, this is what some of the things that Mark and I have talked about, and with my co-host Amanda Sharp, with the Chris and Amanda show, we've talked and sat down to Mark, and he's given us some really great ideas and looked at things, through a different lens, which you do need. And for us, in that show in particular, Amanda and I want to level the show up. So,
Mhm.
to go to that next level, it's great to have another set of ears and eyes on
Yeah,
things.
because we get stuck sometimes in our ways and what we're doing, and we think we're doing everything right, and we're probably doing some bad habits along the way. And sometimes it does just take an outside party that's been doing it for a little bit to be able to come in and just say, "Oh, you know what? I noticed you're not doing this." And that's what happened with me, you, and Amanda. I mean, I would say something like, "Oh, well, have you guys thought about doing this?" And you're like, "No, but I don't know why I didn't think of that." Right? It's so sometimes you
Yeah.
just need that outside party to help open your eyes and ears a little bit.
Absolutely, 100%. It's great, and I know we could go on and on and on about all this, but we will wrap it up because this is great. But this will definitely this is not going to be the last time Mark is going to come on the show. We're going to have Mark on more for sure. But honestly, if you really want to be part of an active community, oh, you know what? We'll take one more question before I do wrap it up. I think
Okay.
CF has got a great question. I just saw it come up, and I do want to acknowledge it before we do wrap. But what's the best way to close out a podcast to best serve the guest? This is a
Mm,
great question, CF.
it
Thank you
is.
for asking that.
It is, and I'm gonna actually say the best way to serve your guest, yes, there is a good way to do this to close out your podcast, and I don't think you're best serving your guest if you're waiting until the end to serve your guest. It's just it's not a good idea because the reality is that most audiences, not in all cases, but there's a good chance. I'll say it like this: there's a good chance that your audience is not staying through 100% of your episode. Right? Once they kind of gone through the majority of it, life happens, distractions happen, and they may not get back to it. So to really serve your guest is to either give them an opportunity during the show to promote whatever it is they want to promote, or again, going back to asking good questions, asking them questions that is promoting what they do, making it clear, like I said in the beginning, like you're writing a book right now, or you've just put out a book. Those little questions like that is serving them well. And yes, at the end, give them that idea, give them that opportunity to promote, right? To provide their own call to action to your audience. Here's where you can find me. Here's what I do, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, absolutely. As you wrap up, give them that chance to make sure they've gotten everything out that they wanted to, and leave it in all that stuff like you were talking about on your show here, Chris. Leave all that info in the show notes as well, and you've served your guest well. And I would say, don't just stop once the episode's over to promote that guest. Give them a little love on social media. Yeah, you're going to promote them in the episode, but find some other ways. Maybe have them do a live stream with you the day of or the day after your episode with them to get them a little more exposure, more opportunity with your audience.
Yeah, those are great, wonderful ideas. Yeah, and if you do an email newsletter, things like that, like include their
Absolutely.
information there, send out the episode to everybody on your email list, and make sure you put contacts, all their contacts in there in that email, because somebody may click on it and go visit them. So, even in this case with Mark, I sent out an email to my email newsletter prior, and I had Mark's links in there to his LinkedIn. I had Mark's links to his website, to his other links that he has on his link tree and all that. So that way people had multiple ways to connect with him, however they'd like to connect with him. So
Hey, Chris, before we wrap up, can I
yeah,
just say that I think one of the other things that's important is a lot of people have high expectations about guests sharing the episode that they were on with you, right?
great point.
And especially when you get the big name guests, right? We get these dreams and visions in our head. Whoa, we got this big name. This is it. We're gonna blow up, right? And the truth is that if you don't make it easy for them to share, they're probably not going to share it. And if they're really big names, they might not even be. I'm getting distracted by these chats,
I
by the way, that's
know.
going on in
Sorry.
there. That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Where was I? You want to make it easy for them to share, okay? And so give them the materials. Like if you're going to create a graphic that's promoting the episode, give them that graphic. Tell them where it works best, because what you might post on Instagram, the size of that graphic or that video might need to be different on Facebook. So give them all the resources that they need so they can easily just go and share it on social media. And yes, you can tag them on your own posts and hope that they share it. They may or may not, but if you can give them as many easy ways to do it, that's going to help you a great deal, because otherwise they're just not going to share it all the time, because they have their own agenda and their own things to promote.
Yep. I love that. Well said. And that's something that I always try to do. And I'm always trying to be good with that, and giving the assets and all that after the show,
Yeah.
and say, hey, because usually I do thing in state. So this is when this comes out, it's usually the video version. It's live streamed, so that lives on, and then I put it up on YouTube, and then I try to send everybody, hey, here's the link for YouTube and all that. And then finally, when I do get it up on the audio feed, then I wind up sending another set, whatever it is, a few weeks later, which is fine, because hey, here it is on the audio feed. I'm putting it on
Right.
in the email newsletter, just so you know, and then everybody, then people can take it and reshare it, and I'll give them,
Yeah, and
additional.
give them a heads up.
Yep.
Give them a heads up early when this is scheduled to publish, right? So that they can at least work it into their calendar. They can be aware, because the worst thing you can do is kind of at least make a guest feel like they're ghosted, right? It's like, okay, thanks for the interview. Here are all the assets, and if they don't even know when the episode's going to post, it doesn't help the cause. So be very communicative and upfront with them as far as when it's going to publish, what you'd like them to do, when you'd like them to share those assets, etc. The more you can share at that point, the better.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
So, with that, This was awesome. Thank you so much, Mark, for coming on. This is just great. And so I definitely encourage everybody to connect with Mark over on ironicmedia.com. We've been talking about it the whole show. And if you've been watching, we've been bringing it up on screen, but you want to either use the link in the show notes or the video description below, or head right over to Ironic Media. It's IRONICK Media, MEDIA.com, or follow Mark on Instagram at Marc Ronick. That's Mark with a C, MARC
Yeah.
RONICK.
Mark with a C, ironic with a CK.
Yeah, there you go. Follow him over there and on Clubhouse, which we've been talking about the whole show. If you want all this information that we've been talking about just on this little show, well, once again, there's a community on Clubhouse called Podcast Morning Chat that Mark mods and moderates.
And
And
you.
yeah, and I come
Yeah.
up, I show up and all that, but you're definitely the main person who shows up every day. And this is what we do. We talk about, it's a podcasting community, and it doesn't matter. Once again, I've said it 100 times this episode. I'm going to say it again. Doesn't matter what level you're at, all are welcome. All questions are welcome as well. Please come, please join us. It's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And yeah, come hang out with us. It's a really fun time, and it's a wonderful community of people. And yes, I'm on there. We have Amanda, my co-host. She's on in there too. We have some other regulars. Chuck comes on, and
Mhm.
you'll Coach Rich. So you'll see a lot of the normal regulars, and some people I've even had on this very show. You'll recognize possibly some of the names
Cool.
for sure. So yeah, come out.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate all those plugs. I don't even need to promote myself now. And thank you for inviting me, and thank you for doing that Clubhouse room with me pretty much every morning during the week. So I appreciate you, and I love being here.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it. I really am. It's a great community, and for me, it's been such a great resource on me helping to just become better as a podcaster, learn more, and meet just amazing people that I really enjoy being around. So
Yes.
yeah, I appreciate you keeping the flame lit on that room.
My
Um,
pleasure.
yeah, absolutely, my friend. And so with that, we're gonna wrap it up. If you'd like to connect with me, you can connect with me directly, once again, using all the links in the show notes below. But I've also made it a little bit easier too. If you want to connect with me directly, get all my contact information, find some more links, you can actually do that immediately from your phone. If you text the words "Let's Rock" to 88500, that's the words "Let's Rock," no spaces, to 88500 right now, you'll actually get all my contact information and get connected with me immediately, and get links and access to some of the things that I have, like my checklist, my personal branding quiz, and my website, and just other great fun things that I'm involved in, as well as my email address and other contact information. So just text the words "Let's Rock" to 88500. And also feel free, if you love the show and you like what we've been providing, and you like the value I've been helping to bring here, feel free to show the love, as I've got some bills to pay around here. You can over to buymeacoffee.com/cvaglio. And that way you can feel free to make a donation of your choosing. Buy me a coffee, because I love coffee, and I buy it every day. So buy me a coffee if you'd like. So with that, everybody, I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching live. And thank you to everybody who's watching and or listening to the replay of this, whether it's on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. I appreciate you. Make sure you hit that like, follow, subscribe button, all those great things that every podcaster always tells you to do, but it does help the show grow. So I very much appreciate it. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave a review really quick, 10-15 seconds. Leave that review and let us know how we're doing here. And we will see you next time on another episode of Rocket Live. Mark, thank you once again, my friend. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate being here.
All right, see you on next time. Remember, always be authentic, always be yourself, and always remember to rock it. Yeah.